When the Quran talks to its audience, it only very seldom says, "O Muslims," or "O Mu'min," "O believers." How does the Quran address its audience? Ya insan, O people, a word that is not gendered. My perspective, and this now, I'm not talking as an alim, but just as a Muslim who has a perspective, is that the basic social teaching of the Quran is Insaniyat. It's to teach us how to be perfected human beings. And it recognizes a common humanity that crosses boundaries of culture, language, and even religion. And yet, when I talk to some of my Muslim colleagues who are, more conservative, and I say that Islam is in fact a humanistic religion in that it has a notion of common humanity, it's like, Islam is different. But of course, it's fascinating to me that it's both the Salafists and the Islamophobes who have the same view of Islam, an exclusivist view of Islam, that we can find the essence of Islam and know what it is and be able to tell how Muslims are going to think on every issue the minute we identify them as Muslims. And that's Orientalism, okay? Under the Orientalist mind view, and I don't have time to go through this, but the West is male, rational. How many people will say that the reason that Europe conquered the world is that we have the rationality of the ancient Greeks and the Enlightenment, and that allowed us to have science, and they're living in a more non-rational, mystical realm. And that's why we won. But as we saw from your lecture, people were reading Plato and Aristotle. They were amazing readers of Plato and Aristotle. I mean, they sometimes mistakenly thought Plotinus was Aristotle, which led them to make some interesting mistakes about Greek philosophy, but that actually led to really creative thinking, if you have to somehow make Plotinus and Aristotle fit together. The idea that somehow, like that Bernard Lewis statement I had yesterday about only, Europe has been able to systematically study the cultures of other peoples. It's just not true, but it's designed in that way. That's why then the Orient gets talked about as female, because women are rational, right? And so then in the literature, in the literary stuff, Islam is this fecund, dangerous, feminine place that you have to be careful about going native and being sucked in. It's a really ugly view of the world. It's a deeply ugly view of the world. In short, Muslims are the other. In the same way, by the way, that women are the other. Those of you who are women in this room and have experienced patriarchy, how often are women described as being different from men and that they're less rational? They're less aggressive. They're more inward looking. They're more intuitive. As opposed to men who are rational, going out into the world, accomplishing things, and creating this stereotype of a female Orient and a male West. Now the problem is why is this a problem for Muslims? Because so many non-Muslims believe it, and particularly non-Muslims who have power, who, write textbooks that define Islam in that way, or make movies that define Islam in that way, or make foreign policy that defines Islam in that way. We have to teach the Iraqis how to be modern. We have to bring the Iranians into the modern world. Because those of us who would never have used a nuclear bomb have to make sure that irrational people don't get them because they might use it. We never did. Hiroshima and Nagasaki. It's just blindness. It's just astonishing. But it's also important because there are Muslims who buy it. Because there are Muslims who believe this. There are Muslims who believe that the reason that Muslims were colonized was that they had the wrong Islam. And part of the reason they had the wrong Islam was they had too many mystics and non-rational thinkers. We needed to, I always find it interesting when I read sort of Salafi Islamist thinkers and they talk about Islam as a perfect sociological system. I'm trying to imagine when the Prophet Muhammad would have spoken like that in Medina. Islam brings a perfect scientific sociological system for orienting us both in this world and in the akhirah. Prophet didn't talk like that. Prophet saw much more continuity between dunya and akhirah, between this world and the next.